6 months after Pearl Harbor, the Pacific was on fire. The Empire of Japan was an unstoppable juggernaut, its fleets roaming the ocean with impunity. The United States Navy was battered, broken, and on the defensive, its battleship fleet sitting at the bottom of the sea. The Japanese High Command, led by the architect of Pearl Harbor, Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, decided it was time to deliver the final, killing blow. They would set a trap to lure America's last remaining aircraft carriers into a battle of annihilation. But they made one fatal miscalculation. They believed they were setting a trap, when in reality they were sailing directly into one. In the early summer of 1942, the fate of the world hung in the balance. The Battle of Midway, which took place from June 4th to June 7th, is often called the turning point of the Pacific War. For decades, it was portrayed as a miracle, a lucky victory against impossible odds. But the truth is far more incredible. This is the story of how a small team of misfit codebreakers in a basement in Hawaii outsmarted the entire Japanese Navy. It's the story of an American admiral's monumental gamble. And it's the story of a handful of pilots who, in 5 fatal minutes, changed the course of World War II. Admiral Yamamoto's plan was a masterpiece of complexity and arrogance. His goal was to seize Midway Atoll, a tiny but strategic American outpost, and in doing so, force the U.S. Pacific Fleet's precious aircraft carriers, USS Enterprise, Hornet, and Yorktown, into a decisive battle where they could be annihilated. He assembled the most powerful naval fleet in Japanese history. At its heart was the Kido Butai, the first air fleet, with its 4 veteran heavy carriers, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu, the very same carriers that had attacked Pearl Harbor. Yamamoto was so confident in his plan and the superiority of his forces that he broke radio silence, transmitting hundreds of coded messages to orchestrate the attack. He had no idea the Americans were listening. Deep in a windowless basement at Pearl Harbor, a small, brilliant, and eccentric team of cryptanalysts was working around the clock. Led by the unconventional commander Joseph Rochefort, Station HYPO had been painstakingly intercepting and attempting to decipher the Japanese Navy's operational code, JN-25. By May 1942, they had made a breakthrough, able to read fragments of the enemy's messages. They knew a massive operation was coming. They knew the target was a location the Japanese code-named AF, but they couldn't prove where AF was. Rochefort and his team were convinced it was Midway, but intelligence officials in Washington disagreed, believing it was the Aleutian Islands or even the U.S. West Coast. Rochefort needed to set a trap of his own. At Rochefort's suggestion, the U.S. Navy ordered the garrison at Midway to send out an uncoded radio message falsely reporting that their water purification system had broken down. A few days later, Station HYPO intercepted a new Japanese message. AF is short of water. The trap had been sprung. Joseph Rochefort now knew Yamamoto's target, his timeline, and the composition of his fleet. The intelligence was a bombshell. Admiral Chester Nimitz, the commander of the Pacific Fleet, was now faced with an impossible choice. His advisors in Washington were skeptical. His fleet was heavily outnumbered, and one of his 3 carriers, the USS Yorktown, had been severely damaged at the Battle of the Coral Sea and was believed to be out of action for months. Nimitz made a monumental gamble. He chose to trust the instincts of his maverick codebreakers over the bureaucracy in Washington. He ordered the shipyards at Pearl Harbor to do the impossible: get the Yorktown battle ready in 3 days. In a Herculean effort, 1,400 workers swarmed the Yorktown, and in just 72 hours, the crippled carrier was patched up, refueled, and sent out to sea. Nimitz was betting everything he had on Rochefort's intelligence. He sailed his 3 carriers and their escorts north of Midway, lying in perfect ambush. On the morning of June 4th, the battle began. The first American attack waves to find the Japanese fleet were the torpedo bomber squadrons from the three carriers. Flying the obsolete TBD Devastator, they came in low and slow, perfect targets for the Japanese Zero fighters and the fleet's anti-aircraft guns. The result was a slaughter. Torpedo Squadron 8 from the Hornet was annihilated. All 15 planes were shot down, with only a single pilot surviving. Of the 41 torpedo bombers that attacked that morning, only 6 made it back. They failed to score a single torpedo hit, but their sacrifice was not in vain. In their suicidal courage, they accomplished two critical things. They occupied the attention of Admiral Nagumo's staff, and more importantly, they drew the Japanese Combat Air Patrol, their protective screen of Zero fighters, down to sea level to destroy them. High above, the sky was now empty, and at that exact moment, the course of the war changed forever. On the decks of the Japanese carriers, there was chaos. Admiral Nagumo, having already launched his first strike on Midway, was in the process of rearming his planes for a second strike. This is a point of historical debate, but the critical fact is that his decks were crowded with armed and fueled aircraft, bombs, and torpedoes, making them floating powder kegs. And then, appearing like ghosts from out of the sun, came the American SBD Dauntless dive bombers from the Enterprise and the Yorktown. They had arrived at the precise moment the Japanese fleet was at its most vulnerable. With the Zero fighters out of position at sea level, the American dive bombers met almost no opposition. In what has become known as the 5 fatal minutes, between 10:22 and 10:27 a.m., the American bombs struck home. The Akagi, Kaga, and Soryu were all hit, and within moments they were transformed into raging infernos. In less time than it takes to make a cup of coffee, 3 of Japan's finest aircraft carriers were doomed. The battle was not quite over. The sole surviving Japanese carrier, the Hiryu, launched a valiant but doomed counterattack that fatally wounded the already damaged USS Yorktown. But later that day, American dive bombers found the Hiryu and sent it to the bottom as well. The final toll was catastrophic for Japan. They had lost 4 of their most powerful aircraft carriers and, just as critically, hundreds of their most experienced and irreplaceable veteran pilots. It was a blow from which the Imperial Japanese Navy would never, ever recover. Midway permanently shifted the strategic balance of power in the Pacific, ending the era of Japanese expansion and allowing the United States to finally go on the offensive. The Battle of Midway was not a miracle. It was an intelligence masterpiece, a commander's courageous gamble, and a victory paid for by the selfless sacrifice of brave men. It was the moment when the hunter became the hunted, and the tide of the Pacific War turned for good. It stands today as a testament to the idea that in warfare, superior intelligence and unbreakable courage can defeat even the most overwhelming force. What do you think was the most critical factor in the victory at Midway? Was it the code-breaking, Nimitz's gamble, or the sacrifice of the torpedo pilots? Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this deep dive, be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell. Thank you for watching.